He may have been one of the most prolific serial killers in history.
What's up? Yeah.
Behind the high walls of prisons lie individuals whose stories seem ripped from the darkest nightmares. Their crimes and acts of brutality not only shocked society, but also turned them into figures feared even by their cellmates.
He's had power over my life for 4 years, and I've struggled for 4 years.
For the first time, we have access to images that reveal the reality of these men, infamous figures whose mere presence creates an atmosphere of tension and danger among inmates and guards alike.
Video that shows a murder that the guards apparently did not notice.
The behavior of some criminals follows unsettling patterns, revealing stages that reflect the darkest corners of the human mind. Each phase is a window into horror, a reminder of what they are capable of doing.
Took the life of my brother.
In this video, we'll take you beyond closed doors to discover who these men are and what drove them to commit acts that even the hardest criminals find incomprehensible. Prepare yourself for a journey deep into the fear and violence hidden behind bars. You'll uncover the most disturbing stories of those who, even in prison, are seen as relentless threats. Number 10. Charles Edmund Cullen. What happens when someone in a position of trust uses their power to harm instead of heal? Charles Edmund Cullen, known as the Angel of Death, is one of the most terrifying serial killers in history, hiding his crimes behind the uniform of a nurse for 16 years. Charles Edmund Cullen, a nurse who worked at multiple hospitals in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, used his access to medical care to carry out a series of chilling murders. He confessed to killing 40 patients, though investigators believe the actual number could be much higher.
Well into the hundreds.
This case not only shocked the medical community, but also exposed systemic flaws in hospital oversight. Cullen's horrifying trajectory began to surface on December 12, 2003, when he was arrested following an investigation linking him to the suspicious deaths of several patients. Initially, he was charged with 1 murder and 1 attempted murder, but during interrogations, Cullen admitted to killing 2 patients at Somerset Medical Center. He also suggested that there were 40 more victims across various hospitals where he had worked. Cullen's methods were disturbingly simple. He administered lethal doses of drugs such as digoxin and insulin, substances that are difficult to trace and often mistaken for natural complications in critically ill patients. This allowed him to operate undetected for years, moving from hospital to hospital without raising serious suspicion.
If it was not in the hundreds, multiple hundreds.
When Cullen was brought to trial, his indifferent and mocking demeanor only intensified public outrage. In April 2004, he pleaded guilty to 13 murders and 2 attempted murders, all committed via lethal injections. As part of a plea deal with prosecutors, Cullen avoided the death penalty in exchange for cooperating to identify more of his victims. This controversial agreement shed light on other cases that might have otherwise remained unsolved, but also drew criticism due to the severity of his crimes. On March 2, 2006, Charles Edmund Cullen was sentenced to 11 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole until he serves 443 years, a sentence that reflects the magnitude of his betrayal and the impact of his crimes. Cullen's case left an indelible mark on the healthcare system and public trust in medical professionals. His ability to operate undetected for so long exposed serious deficiencies in hospital monitoring procedures and employee background checks. How could a man like Cullen operate for so long without being caught? His case raises troubling questions about oversight in hospital settings and the trust placed in those who hold the power to save lives. Share your thoughts in the comments and keep watching to learn about the next criminal on our list of the most infamous figures If you thought Cullen's story was disturbing, wait until you learn about the next man, whose actions shattered the sense of safety even in the most peaceful communities. Number 9. John Wayne Gacy. What happens when the mask of an apparently ordinary man conceals a monster? John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history. His legacy of horror remains a chilling reminder of what can lurk behind a facade of normalcy. Born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, Gacy grew up in a household marked by the abuse of an authoritarian and emotionally distant father. This turbulent childhood sowed the seeds of problematic behavior that later evolved into a cycle of deception and violence. In the 1970s, while living in Norwood Park Township, Gacy gained the trust of his community as a successful businessman and active participant in local events, even dressing up as a clown to entertain children. However, behind this image of a model citizen hid a predator whose thirst for control and violence led him to commit 33 murders, primarily targeting young men and teenagers. Gacy's reign of terror began in 1972, when he lured his first victim to his home under the guise of offering work or friendship. His method was macabre, immobilizing his victims through tricks or force and then committing heinous acts before killing them. For 6 years, Gacy buried the bodies of 26 victims in a small crawl space beneath his house, while others were dumped into the Des Plaines River. Despite the constant disappearances of young men in his area, Gacy maintained his public life as a businessman and community clown, allowing him to continue his crimes without raising suspicion. In December 1978, the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Peast led to an investigation that connected Gacy to the murders. When police searched his house, they uncovered a nightmarish scene, a cemetery beneath his home containing the remains of multiple victims. Gacy's trial in 1980 drew national attention, highlighting the brutality of his crimes and his attempt to justify his actions. His defense argued that Gacy suffered from multiple personality disorder, but the prosecution presented a compelling case, portraying him as a meticulous and calculating murderer. Gacy was found guilty of 33 murders, the highest number of homicide convictions at the time in the United States. He was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. The crimes of John Wayne Gacy left a deep scar on his community and the nation. His actions led to greater awareness of the dangers posed by sexual predators and the need to improve investigations into disappearances. How could a man with such an exemplary public life commit such horrific acts for so long? His case remains a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most innocent of masks. Number 8. Thomas Edward Silverstein. What drives a man to become one of the most dangerous and feared inmates in prison history? Thomas Edward Silverstein, known for his brutal acts even within the most secure prisons, is a case that defies simple explanation. Thomas Edward Silverstein was born on February 4, 1952, in Long Beach, California. From a young age, his life was marked by conflict and emotional challenges that shaped his future. Raised in an unstable family environment, Thomas grew up shy and frequently bullied. The lessons in toughness imparted by his mother, instead of protecting him, led him to adopt an aggressive mindset that defined his future decisions. At 19, Silverstein made his first major mistake, an armed robbery that landed him in San Quentin prison. However, this was only the beginning of a downward spiral. Shortly after his release, he became involved in criminal activities alongside his family. In 1977, a series of armed robberies resulted in a 15-year prison sentence in Leavenworth, Kansas. It was in Leavenworth that Silverstein's life took a dark and permanent turn. By joining the Aryan Brotherhood, a violent supremacist gang, Silverstein found a place where his aggressive instincts were nurtured and exploited. In 1980, he was accused of murdering a fellow inmate, Danny Atwell, marking the start of his violent legacy. Following this incident, he was transferred to the high-security USP Marion in Illinois, where the violence escalated. At Marion, Silverstein was responsible for multiple murders, including the killing of corrections officer Merle Klutz in 1983. This crime was so brutal that it prompted changes in U.S. prison policies. Thomas Silverstein spent 36 years in solitary confinement, becoming the inmate who endured the longest period in isolation in U.S. prison history. During this time, his story became a focal point in debates about solitary confinement and its impact on mental health. On May 11, 2019, Silverstein died from complications following heart surgery. His death closed a dark chapter in prison history, but his legacy of violence and controversy remains alive. What do you think of Thomas Silverstein's story? Was he a product of his circumstances, or does he represent the dangers of unchecked human nature? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Number 7. Alvin Francis Karpis. What drives a man from a curious boy to one of the most notorious criminals of his time? The story of Alvin Francis Karpis, also known as Creepy Karpis, unveils the rise and fall of one of America's most wanted outlaws. Alvin Francis Karpis was born on August 10, 1907 in Montreal, Canada, as Alvin Francis Karpavicius. Of Lithuanian descent, his early environment was rife with negative influences. By the age of 10, he was associating with smugglers, gamblers, and local criminals, laying the groundwork for a life steeped in crime. At 19, Karpis was arrested for an attempted robbery and sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, instead of reforming, prison became a place where he honed his criminal skills and formed dangerous alliances. While in Kansas State Penitentiary, Karpis met Fred Barker, and together they formed the infamous Barker-Karpis Gang. This group specialized in bank robberies, kidnappings, and violent crimes, quickly climbing the ranks of organized crime. Karpis was known for his strategic intelligence and ruthless demeanor, traits that set him apart. One of the gang's most notorious acts was the murder of Sheriff C. Roy Kelly, which cemented their reputation as one of the most feared criminal organizations in the United States. The crime that ultimately led to Karpis's downfall was the kidnapping of Edward Bremer, a prominent banker whose release was secured for a $200,000 ransom. This incident drew the attention of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who ordered the FBI to intensify its pursuit of the gang. The Barker-Karpis gang met its demise in 1936 after a series of violent confrontations with law enforcement. On May 1, 1936, Karpis was arrested in New Orleans by FBI agents led by J. Edgar Hoover in a highly publicized operation. He was one of the few criminals personally apprehended by Hoover, further enhancing his infamy. After a swift trial, Karpis was sentenced to life in prison and sent to Alcatraz, where he spent 26 years. He became one of the prison's longest-serving inmates, known for his ability to manipulate other inmates and avoid serious trouble while secretly planning his eventual release. Paroled in 1969, Karpis was released into a world vastly different from the one he had left behind. He attempted to rebuild his life, but his criminal record limited his opportunities. Eventually, he was deported to Canada, where he was unable to obtain a passport due to his past. Seeking peace, he settled in Spain, where he died on August 26, 1979. While his death was initially reported as a suicide, it was later determined to be from natural causes. The life of Alvin Francis Karpis serves as a reminder of how early choices and negative influences can shape a person's destiny. He was a master of crime who eluded justice for years, but his legacy is defined by his capture and long imprisonment in one of the world's most feared prisons. Could Karpis have redeemed himself if given another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned to discover who ranks next on our list of the most infamous criminals. Number 6. Dennis Rader, BTK Killer. What happens when evil adopts a facade of normalcy? Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, short for bind, torture, kill, is a chilling example of how a monster can hide in plain sight. Dennis Rader was born in 1945 in Kansas, and from a young age, he harbored disturbing fantasies about torturing and killing. For years, Rader lived as a model citizen, serving as president of his church and a Boy Scout leader. Yet behind this respectable facade lurked one of modern history's most notorious serial killers, whose crimes terrified communities while he maintained an impeccable public image. Rader's reign of terror began on January 15, 1974, with the brutal murder of the Otero family in Wichita, Kansas. Joseph Otero, 38, Julie Otero, 33, and their children, Joseph Jr., 9, and Josephine, 11, were bound, tortured, and killed in their home, leaving the community in shock and law enforcement without leads. Months later, Rader struck again, murdering 21-year-old Catherine Bright in April 1974. Over the years, he continued to kill women, carefully selecting his victims and leaving behind a trail of horror. Among his most well-known victims were Maureen Hedge and Vicky Vegala, whom he attacked using his signature method: binding, torturing, and ultimately killing them. What made Rader even more terrifying was his ability to live a seemingly normal life. As the president of Christ Lutheran Church and a community leader, he was respected and considered a figure of authority. This double life allowed him to evade detection for decades, while taunting authorities by sending letters detailing his crimes under the alias BTK. Despite his meticulous planning, Rader's craving for attention ultimately led to his downfall. In 2005, after years of silence, he sent a floppy disk to a local TV station, confident that it couldn't be traced. However, investigators discovered metadata on the disk that linked it to a computer at the church where Rader worked. This crucial mistake led to his arrest. During his trial, Rader coldly confessed to murdering 10 people between 1974 and 1991. He detailed his crimes with chilling detachment, displaying a complete lack of empathy. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing an end to a dark chapter in American criminal history. The case of Dennis Rader is a chilling reminder of how evil can hide behind a mask of normalcy. His story underscores the importance of vigilance even when appearances suggest otherwise. How could a man like Dennis Rader live among us undetected for so long? His case raises profound questions about human nature and the complexities of evil. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what you think of this recount of history's most infamous criminals. Rader's legacy remains a stark reminder that even the most familiar faces can conceal the darkest secrets. Number 5. Richard Lee McNair. What drives a man to repeatedly defy the odds and the walls of prison? Richard Lee McNair, born on December 19, 1958, is no ordinary criminal. He is renowned as a master escape artist whose breakouts have confounded authorities for decades. McNair's criminal career began with a botched robbery that led to a murder conviction in 1987. Instead of resigning himself to life behind bars, McNair became obsessed with escape. His ingenious methods, combined with an almost supernatural ability to improvise, earned him a spot among history's most notorious fugitives. McNair's first escape in 1988 was straight out of a movie. Using a tube of lip balm to lubricate his wrists, he managed to slip out of his handcuffs and temporarily evade authorities. Although he was recaptured shortly afterward, this event marked the beginning of a series of escapes that would challenge even the most secure prison systems. In 1992, McNair executed a second escape, this time navigating through the prison's ventilation ducts. His ability to move undetected allowed him to evade guards and vanish into the night. However, he was once again recaptured. But it was in April 2006 that McNair pulled off his most audacious and memorable escape. While serving time at a federal prison in Pollock, Louisiana, he devised a plan that left authorities stunned. Exploiting his job in the prison workshop, he hid inside a mailbag and was transported out of the facility without raising suspicion. Hours later, an officer spotted McNair running near train tracks and stopped to question him. Displaying remarkable calm, McNair improvised a story, claiming he was a jogger staying at a nearby hotel. His composed demeanor convinced the officer who let him go. This interaction, captured on body camera footage, later went viral, showcasing McNair's extraordinary ability to manipulate situations in his favor. After escaping, McNair made his way to Canada, where he managed to evade authorities for 18 months. During this time, he used fake identities, blended into the community, and lived a relatively normal life. However, in October 2007, he was finally recaptured in a small Canadian town. Richard Lee McNair is not just known for his ability to escape, but also for his ingenuity and adaptability under pressure. His breakouts have sparked debates about prison security and inspired studies on the psychology of criminals who defy conventional norms. Is McNair a genius of deception or a product of the failures of the prison system? Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned to discover who ranks next on our list of infamous criminals. Number 4. Nico Allen Jenkins. What happens when a system fails to identify and address severe mental health issues? Nico Allen Jenkins, notorious for a chilling killing spree in Omaha, Nebraska, is a case that exposes the disconnect between justice and rehabilitation. Nico Allen Jenkins was born on September 16, 1986, in Omaha, Nebraska. From a young age, his life was steeped in violence, both in his environment and his behavior. Arrested as a teenager, Jenkins spent more than a decade in prison for carjacking, during which his deteriorating mental health went untreated. Upon his release on July 30, 2013, Jenkins re-entered society without any supervised transition. Just 2 weeks later, he unleashed a horrifying series of murders that shocked the Omaha community. His first victims were Ju Banner, 26, and Jorge C. Cajiga Ruiz, 25. Jenkins lured them to an isolated location under the pretense of a casual meeting, but what followed was sheer brutality. He shot both in the head, robbed them of their belongings, and left their bodies in a pickup truck. Not satisfied with these acts, Jenkins continued his spree. His next victim was Curtis Bradford, a former prison mate, and up until that day, a friend. They had even posed for a photograph together the day before Jenkins ruthlessly killed him. This heinous act came with the murder of Andrea Kruger, a mother of 3 who worked tirelessly for her family and community. Jenkins used a 12-gauge shotgun to end her life on a rural road, leaving a scene of violence so gruesome it horrified investigators. On August 30, 2013, Jenkins was arrested after surveillance footage and other evidence tied him to the murders. During interrogations, his confessions took a bizarre and disturbing turn. He claimed to be guided by Apophis, an ancient serpent god, highlighting his severe detachment from reality. During his trial, Jenkins chose to represent himself, leading to a chaotic spectacle. He spoke in tongues, laughed uncontrollably, and displayed erratic behavior, particularly during the testimonies of the victims' families. He was ultimately sentenced to death, though his case sparked widespread debate about the justice system's role in addressing mental health among inmates. Nico Allen Jenkins' story serves as a grim warning about the consequences of neglecting mental health in the penal system. His acts of violence could have been prevented with a proper focus on rehabilitation and treatment. Number 3. Lucy Letby. What happens when someone entrusted to save lives becomes the cause of death? Lucy Letby, born on January 4, 1990, is now known as one of the most prolific baby killers in recent UK history, leaving an indelible mark of horror on the healthcare system. Letby worked as a neonatal nurse at Countess of Chester Hospital starting in 2011, initially earning praise for her dedication to caring for vulnerable babies. However, her image as a model professional crumbled when an alarming pattern of deaths began to emerge in the neonatal unit. Within just a few years, Letby went from being a celebrated nurse to one of the most infamous criminals in the country. Dr. Ravi Jayaram, a senior physician at the hospital, was among the first to notice a troubling rise in baby deaths and critical emergencies linked to Letby. Despite raising concerns in 2015 and 2016, hospital authorities dismissed his warnings, allowing the tragedy to continue. As the deaths mounted, Letby's colleagues began observing strange and unsettling behavior. Some described her demeanor as cold and detached during critical emergencies, further fueling suspicions about her involvement in the incidents. In May 2017, Cheshire Police launched a formal investigation into the deaths and medical emergencies in the neonatal unit. By July 2018, Letby was arrested, marking the beginning of one of the most shocking cases in British medical history. Letby's trial began in October 2022 at Manchester Crown Court, where the prosecution presented damning evidence against her. During a search of her home, investigators found handwritten notes containing disturbing and self-critical thoughts, some of which suggested guilt. Facing 22 charges, Letby pleaded not guilty, maintaining that she had always acted in her patient's best interests. However, the prosecution argued that she had deliberately harmed at least 12 babies using lethal methods such as injecting air, causing painful deaths and medical emergencies. After a 10-month trial, the jury found Letby guilty of 14 of the 22 charges on August 18, 2023. She was sentenced to life imprisonment for each offense, ensuring that she will spend the rest of her life behind bars. The case of Lucy Letby has shaken both the medical community and the public. Failures in oversight allowed her crimes to continue for years, prompting a critical review of protocols in neonatal units. How could someone entrusted with protecting vulnerable lives cause so much harm? Letby's case raises troubling questions about accountability and vigilance in medical care. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next criminal on this list whose actions left permanent scars on their community. Number 2. Charles Bronson. What drives a man to become the symbol of chaos within the British prison system? Michael Gordon Peterson, better known as Charles Bronson, evokes fear, controversy, and fascination in equal measure. Born on December 6, 1952, Charles Bronson's life began with a turbulent childhood that set the stage for his violent tendencies. From an early age, his natural aggression and frequent street fights earned him a reputation as a relentless fighter, a trait that would define his life both inside and outside of prison. Bronson's entry into the criminal world came in 1974 when, armed with a sawed-off shotgun, he attempted to rob a post office in Luton. This act brought him face-to-face with police in a violent shootout during which several officers were injured before his eventual capture. His erratic behavior during the trial, where he frequently interrupted proceedings and openly mocked authority, solidified his reputation as a dangerous and unpredictable criminal. Declared mentally unstable due to his violent behavior, Bronson was transferred to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital. Even here, his aggression could not be contained. During his time at Broadmoor, he attacked other patients and attempted to take hostages on multiple occasions. It was during this period that he adopted the name Charles Bronson, inspired by the famous Hollywood actor, to reinforce his identity as a formidable and unforgettable figure. Bronson was repeatedly moved between maximum security prisons, including Parkhurst and Wakefield, always under strict supervision due to his explosive outbursts. Despite spending much of his time in isolation, he found ways to channel his energy, using his solitude to build both his physical strength and his creativity. In 2007, he published a book titled Solitary Fitness, in which he shared his unique approach to physical exercise in solitary confinement, detailing how he maintained his mental and physical resilience even in the harshest conditions. One of the most infamous incidents in his life occurred in 1998 at HMP Birmingham. Bronson took 2 prisoners hostage, demanding a helicopter for his escape. The standoff with prison authorities became a prolonged and tense situation, showcasing not only his audacity, but also his ability to create chaos even under maximum surveillance. Charles Bronson remains a polarizing figure, a man who continually defied the norms of the prison system and became a symbol of unrelenting defiance. While he has spent most of his life in confinement, his story has sparked debates about the effectiveness of the prison system in managing individuals with violent tendencies. Number 1. Rodney Alcala. What happens when charm and talent become tools for manipulation and violence? Rodney Alcala, also known as the dating game killer, is a chilling example of how a charismatic facade can mask the darkest impulses. Born on August 23, 1943 in San Antonio, Texas, Rodney Alcala had a childhood marked by abandonment and instability. His life took a disturbing turn after he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder following a nervous breakdown while serving in the army. Despite his troubled history, Alcala used his charm and charisma to construct a facade of normalcy, deceiving everyone around him. In the 1970s, Alcala moved to New York and adopted the alias John Berger, posing as a professional photographer. Offering glamorous photo shoots to young women, he leveraged his magnetic personality to gain their trust, while secretly harboring lethal intentions. In June 1971, Cornelia Crilly, a 23-year-old flight attendant, became one of his first known victims. She was brutally raped and strangled in her apartment, a crime that went unsolved for decades. In July 1977, Ellen Hoover, the daughter of a prominent businessman, disappeared after meeting Alcala. Her body was later found abandoned in a field, confirming another of his heinous acts. What made Alcala even more horrifying was his ability to evade justice for years. While continuing his string of crimes, he built a reputation as a photographer and even appeared on the television show The Dating Game in 1978. On the show, Alcala was introduced as a charming bachelor, with no one suspecting he was already a serial killer. In 1979, Alcala was arrested for the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Robin Samso in California. Although convicted, his sentence was overturned twice due to trial irregularities. Finally, in 2010, he was sentenced to death for 5 murders in California, but investigations continued to link him to more killings. In 2012, Alcala confessed to the murders of Cornelia Crilly and Ellen Hoover, confirming long-held suspicions by authorities. Over the years, he has been linked to at least 130 murders across the United States, with investigations into his crimes still ongoing. Rodney Alcala is a chilling reminder of how a predator can hide in plain sight. His case exposed flaws in the judicial system and the ease with which he moved between states to commit his crimes. Conclusion. Throughout this list, we've explored the minds and actions of some of history's most chilling criminals. Each stands out not only for the brutality of their crimes, but also for their ability to conceal their true nature behind masks of normalcy and trust. From those who earned the respect of their communities to those who became masters of deception, these stories serve as a haunting reminder of the fragility of human perception. Their lives leave an indelible mark, illustrating how evil can infiltrate even the safest corners of society. These are not just tales of horror, but also warnings about the dangers of ignoring the signs and the importance of vigilance in the face of the unexpected. Which of these criminals do you find the most disturbing? Which story impacted you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation with our community. For more compelling content like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. See you in the next video.